Hello, everyone. I want to take a moment to say hello to you. I hope you're doing well. I hope your week is going well and that your semester is continuing to go well. The purpose of this short video lecture today and for this particular module is to talk about formal letters, sort of what they are and the three types of formal letters that you may be expected to write as an accountant, and some tips and considerations to keep in mind when structuring these letters. And I think one of the things that you'll see as we look into this is that we've been doing some of this work already with previous assignments in our modules. We've talked a little bit about audience and how to target and think about audience. We've done a little bit of this work when I gave you the tax scenario about having to either deal with the tax issue immediately with the client because of the tax mistake, or going back and filing the incorrect tax return and then doing an amendment, which option that you chose, which one that you felt like was the better option for your client. You also came up with, most of you came up with a price structure for which option, in terms of which option that you chose and which option that you thought was best. So you're going to see some of those concepts and ideas align with and fall into place with what we're going to talk about today. But I did want to make you aware of just the three main types of letters that you may experience as accountants and some things to consider when writing those. So let me share my screen, and I've got just a short presentation I wanted to share with you, just some notes to keep in mind with regards to this, so that you'll know when we think about formal letters in accounting and the kind of formal letters that are expected of accountants, what they are and why to do them and how we do them. I know some of you have done internships already in other places. Some of you are doing internships right now. Some of you may be doing internships next semester. Wherever you fall in that structure, you may have a little bit more familiarity with some of this. If this is new to you for the first time, that's okay too. If you're more experienced with this, hopefully this will be a refresher for you, or just give you some ideas and tips and strategies to reconsider or think about more deeply moving forward. So we're going to look at three types of letters that accountants may be expected to write. Content may change, length may change, the structure of them may change depending on the issue, the subject matter, who you're writing it for. But here are some basic structural components for sales letters, response letters, and also claims. When we talk about sales letters, basically what we are talking about is letters that are being used to promote goods or services. And this kind of spills over and comes out of more business and technical writing information, or more business and technical writing content and background. A sales letter may be something that you're asked to write as an accountant, depending on where you work, where you're trying to persuade someone to use your services, or you're trying to get them to initiate and engage in some kind of a call to action. So if you desire to open your own accounting firm someday, if you want to open your own accounting firm and have maybe a small firm or a medium-sized firm, and you're just setting up shop, or you're just setting up your business in a community maybe that you don't have a lot of connection with, or that you don't have a lot of background with, you may be having to write this kind of a sales letter because you're trying to solicit business. You're trying to get businesses in that community or that town to consider using you as an accountant. And you may be trying to reach out to individuals who are looking for an accountant and they need someone to help them with their small business or with their individual taxes. And you may have to try to solicit business that way. So I gave you an example there of sort of the latter. You know, you're running an accounting firm, maybe you're setting up an accounting firm, and you want to get some clients, prospective clients, interested and considering your services and your company for specific services. One of the things that you want to do when you're writing the sales letter, this is true of all three, but especially sales letters, is you want to think about who that reader is before you target the letter. If you are targeting a medium to large size business in your town or community that you want to use you for tax purposes, for example, you're going to structure that letter a little bit differently than if you're going into an individual neighborhood and trying to solicit business for tax services, where you may have a variety of people of different ages, of different educational backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, all sort of stacked up house to house to house in the same street, or all living floor to floor to floor in a particular condo or apartment building. All of those people are going to have different expectations, different experiences, different financial circumstances that are going to impact what they're going to expect or what they're going to want to know from your sales letter. When they open up that sales letter, when they open up that document, they're all going to come to that writing and come to that persuasive text with different experiences and backgrounds, as opposed to a company where everybody is kind of working for a certain company. Everybody has maybe a various skill level, even though you may have different structures or different levels of work in that particular business. You may have, frontline workers, you may have mid-level management, you may have corporate management, then maybe a CEO. The audience there is a little different than if it would be for a neighborhood where you've got a variety of ages, backgrounds, and ability levels. So you have to think about the reader, and you want to frame the information so that all of those readers get a general sense of what you are offering, what you are providing or proposing to provide, and how you can help them accomplish whatever it is you feel like your letter wants them to accomplish or can help them accomplish based on your background and your expertise. So sometimes we oftentimes curate, and we see these sales letters curated through mailing lists. You really want to make sure that if you're sending a sales letter from a mail list, that you do something to make that letter seem personal. How many times have you gotten a letter in the mail from a business or a company or a credit card company or someone soliciting information or soliciting services or trying to solicit services from you, and it just says, "Dear client," or "Dear prospective client," or "Dear resident," or "Dear addressee"? Well, that clearly tells the reader immediately from the beginning, you're just, pulling this off of some listserv or some Excel sheet or some Rolodex, whatever it may be, and just sending these out en masse. So think about ways that you can personalize that sales letter. Maybe you find, if it's a neighborhood, maybe you get the names of the people living in that neighborhood and you say, "Dear John Smith," or "Dear Mr. Smith." If you're targeting a certain sales letter to a business or a company, maybe you go online and find out, who's the decision maker here? Who's the person that's going to ultimately say, "Yes, we're going to do this. No, we're going to not do this," in terms of taking a call to action with your sales letter. Then target that letter specifically to them. Think of ways to make it less generic and more specific. And oftentimes you're at least going to get a response from that particular audience group that you're looking for. So that's the first type of letter, sales letter. Second type of letter is what we call a response letter. I put as a small business owner, because some of this comes from business and technical writing. If you desire to be own your own accounting business someday, and I know talking with some of you, that is a desire for some of you. But if you're an accountant, even if you're an accountant, you're a small business owner, you want to be a manager, you want to be a mid-level or upper-level management in a firm. Oftentimes these response letters, you're wanting clients, you're wanting investors, maybe potential employees, to respond to something that you have sent them. And we've looked at some examples of response letters, and there's been some samples in the textbook that we've looked at and kind of talked about. And you've had some practice writing response letters and response formal letters in some ways from earlier assignments and earlier modules. But one of the things that you want to make sure is that if you're sending out a response letter, that you indicate what it is that you want the audience or the recipient of that letter to do, and then you want to respond promptly to what you've asked for them to do. So if you send a response letter asking for someone to contact you, "Please contact me within 24 hours with your answer or with the information," and they respond within 24 hours, you want to respond promptly to what they've sent you. You don't want to leave that information languishing in your email box. You don't want to leave it languishing on your desk. You don't want to leave it languishing in a folder somewhere. You want to give the same prompt response after the response has been initiated from the customer or the recipient as you demanded. So if you demanded 24 hours, don't wait 3 weeks to get back in touch with them or to take the next step. You have to keep that in mind. Response letters, you want responses from the recipient, but then you have to be ready to respond in kind to whatever it is that you need them to do. You can also structure a response letter to offer gratitude for the interest. Thank them for responding. "Thank you so much for responding within the time I requested. Thank you so much for getting back in touch with me. Thank you so much for letting me know your specific situation." All of those kinds of things help personalize that letter and help the reader and the audience understand you're targeting that response, you're targeting that letter and that correspondence to them specifically. If there's any questions that have come up or any questions that you ask them to clarify as you respond to their communication, their initial response, as you respond back. Address those questions as much as possible. If you can't address them specifically, you're not authorized to do so, or you don't know all of the specific information, refer them to places where they can get that information. If you're not in a position at your accounting firm to talk about price structure necessarily, because that's something that's handled at a level above you, then give them information or direct them in a place where they can go get that information. For more information, for example, about price structure or our fee structure for services, visit this website, or I encourage you to consult this brochure that has been attached, which will explain that information. So make sure that whatever questions are asked in that response to you, as you respond back to the constituent or the audience group or the receiver of the message or the letter, that you address and answer those questions and provide them information for where they can get answers to their questions if you don't know or you're not authorized to provide that information. If they're asking you to do something in the response, you've asked them to do something, you've asked them to send you something, you need to be able to specifically say, yes, I got it, it was processed, or no, I did not get it and it was not processed. If you're sending a response letter asking for tax documentation from a client so that you can file their taxes properly, and they have sent you the incorrect information, you need to tell them, I was not able to process your tax return because you didn't send me the right information, or you sent me XYZ information but forgot to include this. That's the kind of thing that you have to do in a response letter. And you also want to be firm and consistent about the information that you have asked for and the information that you are responding to from that initial communication. So be clear, be firm, don't be apologetic. Don't say, well, I really hate to do this, but I really hate to ask you again for that tax document, or I really hate to tell you that I couldn't file your taxes, but no, be clear and firm in your conviction. Explain exactly why it is you weren't able to do or to take the next step, or what you need to do to take the next step. And then thank them again, thank them for their relationship, thank them for responding again in kind, in a prompt manner, in the response letter with some kind of a positive message that lets that person know, even though maybe you couldn't grant their request, you couldn't do what they asked you to do, that you are still willing to work with them, that you're not upset with them, that this is not the end of your relationship on a professional level, and that things will continue. We just have to have these things completed, and I could not grant this at this time for these reasons. And people are for the most part, understanding of that, and they realize if they've made a mistake or they need to provide more information, that's what they need to do, and they'll be able to, and they'll do their best to get that information to you. The third type of a letter is a claim. Now, some of you may not have a whole lot to do with claim letters. I know, talking with some of you want to go into to tax law and work with insurance and that kind of thing. Then claims become a little bit more urgent in that circumstance. But claims oftentimes come when you're dealing with a vendor or a supplier, or you're answering a claim from a customer. You may need to respond with what we call a claim or an adjustment letter. And this is where, for example, you may be saying, hey, look, here's the situation with your taxes. I'm either going to have to file it again correctly, and it's going to cost you this amount, or we can file the incorrect return and do an amendment later, in which case it may cost you a little less on the front end, but it's going to lead to potentially more work for me and more hourly billing down the road. That's an example of a claim letter. Or your company or your firm or your accounting firm has a relationship with a computer supplier. Maybe all the computers in your office are Apple computers, and there's a problem with software. Or maybe you have a paper vendor that you use. Maybe Xerox provides the paper that your company uses for copying and for document creation, and there's an issue. Either they have not provided the service that you've paid for, they've overcharged you, they've undercharged you, they've not provided the product that you've asked for. That might be an example of initiating a claim. But if you don't do these kinds of letters, or if you do these kinds of letters, depending on kind of what area of tax work and accounting work you want to fall into, you want to keep in mind some of the same things that we talked about with the other two types of letters. You want to be clear in your writing, be very specific about what it is that you are writing about and why the issue is a problem. You want to make sure that you maintain a respectful tone. You want to honor the feelings by dissatisfied customers. If you're sending a claim or sending out a claim letter for a customer or a client who's not satisfied with the services that you provided, something to the effect of, I certainly understand why you would be frustrated. I certainly understand why this claim letter was written. This is not the level of service our firm is used to providing. This is not the level of service I'm used to providing as an accountant, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the kinds of things that you want to do. You want to acknowledge briefly that customer or client or business has a reason and a responsibility not only to be upset, but has a justified reason for being upset. It's going to be your responsibility, rather, to try to make it right, or to try to come up with a better solution. And again, as we talked about with the other two, you want to make sure that you establish goodwill. You don't want this claim letter or this response to a claim to be the end of the relationship. You want to continue to have a good relationship with these individuals or this business or this company. You don't want to let a mistake or a situation like this ruin that. So again, some takeaways from this: you want to make sure that your formal letters, if it's one of those three types or sort of a mix of the two, that it follows a precise format. You want to maintain a professional tone. As we've talked about in other examples, oftentimes when we write as accountants, we're not only writing to represent ourselves, but we're writing to represent the firm or the company whose name and insignia is at the letterhead or who's down here on the footer at the bottom of the page. Keep that in mind. If that's not present in the letter that you're sending, make sure that you put your information on there. How can that person get in contact with you? Where's your physical address? What's your email address? What's your telephone number? And if you have a preferred method of contact, you'd rather them respond in email, you'd rather them come by and see you in person, then indicate that in that letterhead or somewhere in that letter, even if the letterhead is provided. You want to keep in mind that you want to use block format. We've talked about block format some. The textbook talks a little bit more about block format. That's basically single-spaced paragraphs, all flush to the left. We don't indent the first line of a block format letter like we do when we're writing a reflection response or some other type of more academic writing. We align everything to the left. We use single space. We use single spaced lines of text within the block letter format. We single space text between paragraphs. So we have a block of text. We skip a space, another block of text. We skip a space, another block of text. And then ultimately we have our signature at the very bottom. Keep in mind, as we've been focusing on and working on all semester, clarity and brevity work really, really well in these formal letters, even if you're dealing with serious and sensitive issues. And again, make sure if you want the recipient or the reader or the audience of your letter to do something, make sure you clearly spell out and articulate to them what it is you need them to do, what the next steps are, and then what you are going to be doing on the other side of it once they do respond, once they do provide whatever it is you need them to do, once they initiate response that they want to hire your company, once they initiate a claim, once they initiate a response to something you've asked for, then what are you going to do next? What's the timeline? What's the time frame, if you know it, for the next steps on your end with regards to the situation? So those are just some things to think about with formal letters. In a way that the writing themselves is not oftentimes too complicated. You're not writing 4 and 5 page letters here in these formal letters, but you do want to be clear and concise, and you want to make sure you think about your audience. You want to make sure that you give them clear instruction and clear perspective as to what's going on, what you need them to do, and then what you are going to do after they have done their part in whatever it is that you're asking for. So just some things to keep in mind as we work through this module on formal letters, and as we carry some of those skills and strategies forward for the remainder of the semester in our other modules. But I think what you've seen through this lecture today is we're pulling in a lot of the information that we've talked about with audience, with clear, concise writing, with headings, with being specific, but being informative. All those things we've been working on and talking about this semester really kind of manifests itself in a formal letter that is going to go out to a client or a group of individuals that fit into a certain audience bracket. So that's all I have to say about this. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns about formal letters, or if you want to talk about them more. In the meantime, take care, and I'll talk to you again soon.